The year 1964 stands as a monumental and fiercely debated moment in American history, defined by the sweeping legislative agenda of President Lyndon B. Johnson and the Democratic-controlled Congress, alongside pivotal military escalations and ethical controversies. Johnson had inherited the legacy of the slain President Kennedy and quickly seized the opportunity to push for what he called the Great Society, an ambitious vision designed to end poverty and racial injustice. The cornerstone of this domestic push was the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964, which launched the War on Poverty. This act established the Office of Economic Opportunity and gave birth to now famous programs like the Job Corps and Community Action Agencies. While intended to provide uplift and opportunity for the nation's poor, these programs were immediately criticized and remain controversial today. Detractors argue that this massive expansion of the federal government's welfare apparatus ultimately subsidized dependency, discouraged self-reliance, and severely weakened the structure of traditional families, particularly within the Black community, by creating disincentives for two-parent homes, a tragic, if unintended, consequence that critics claim destroyed the Black nuclear family. In parallel with the War on Poverty, Johnson and the Democrats achieved the landmark legislative victory of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This sweeping law outlawed segregation in public accommodations, banned employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, and provided the federal government with enforcement power to accelerate school desegregation and protect voting rights. However, even this historically positive legislation was met with intense negative resistance, primarily from Southern Democrats, or Dixiecrats, who famously led a lengthy filibuster against it. Their arguments centered on principles of states' rights, claiming the federal government was illegally infringing on local jurisdiction and economic liberty, asserting the government had no right to mandate how private business owners must operate. The immediate political consequence of this Democratic-led legislative success was the fracturing of the old Democratic coalition and the beginning of the political realignment of the Solid South, where voters, often driven by prejudicial and racist motives, began their mass defection toward the Republican Party. On the foreign policy and military front, 1964 saw an event that is frequently cited as a manipulative and unethical act that initiated a major escalation in the Vietnam conflict: the passage of the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution in August. Following alleged attacks on U.S. naval vessels in the Gulf of Tonkin, attacks that historical analysis later suggested were either exaggerated or non-existent, President Johnson persuaded Congress to pass the resolution. This act, approved overwhelmingly by the Democratic majority Congress, granted the president broad, effectively unchecked authority to use military force in Southeast Asia without a formal declaration of war. Critics decry this as an illegal and unethical usurpation of congressional power, driven by misrepresentation and resulting in the massive long-term commitment of U.S. troops, casualties, and the subsequent devastating consequences of the Vietnam War. Furthermore, Johnson's administration faced allegations of illegal and unethical conduct rooted in his drive for political power. He was known for ruthlessly employing what was dubbed the Johnson treatment to pressure lawmakers. More critically, he and his administration are alleged to have used the power of federal agencies, particularly the FBI, to illegally surveil, harass, and gather dirt on political opponents and leaders of the civil rights movement, such as Martin Luther King Jr., representing a serious abuse of government power for personal and political ends. Thus, the 1964 legacy is one of high-stakes, transformative action, inextricably linked with divisive political shifts, the inception of long-running social policy debates, and military entanglement founded on controversial and arguably unethical premises.